Hello, students of the short story. Today we are going to talk about D.H. Lawrence's really terrific story, The Horse Dealer's Daughter. D.H. Lawrence was a British writer. He lived in different parts of the world. A really intense writer, a real intense guy. And he wrote from he got really into people's psyches, psychology. If you're a Freudian critic, which means you look at an author's work through the lens of the theories of Sigmund Freud, and there are a lot of Freudian critics out there. I studied with one at UAlbany. D.H. Lawrence is perfect for that. There's a lot of Freudian stuff going on in all of D.H. Lawrence and this story in particular. I actually want to start with your marvelous discussion board posts. You guys, those of you who did the discussion boards really nailed it. Asia succinctly puts it, Mabel feels alone with her mother being gone and her brothers being distant. She desperately wants to feel loved and wanted by someone. That drives her actions. Absolutely true. Some of you hammered in a little more with details. Kezia, Mabel was a sad character that tried to escape from reality. She's very sad character. Her actions were drawn from her love for her mother, absolutely, as well as the memory of her mother. We're going to dig into that later. Her actions were also drawn from wanting to feel secure in a world where her mother was. Bazinga, exactly. On page 204, it says that mindless and persistent, she seemed in a sort of ecstasy to becoming near her mother. Yeah, we're going to look at that more closely. Brooklyn, you nailed it as well. What drives Mabel's actions definitely starts out with her mother not being around. She felt secure being in a world where her mother was, and that is something that seems she always hopes to happen again. Her brothers were not concerned about her. Exactly. Angela got into the loss that Mabel is experiencing. So when we really dig into the story, we're going to look at the sort of loss of the farm. The horses are leaving. The brothers are going to different places. Mabel is losing the one thing she has left. And that's really a trigger for all of the unresolved mourning for her mother and the loss of her mother and the loss of her father. We'll get into that. The loss of the horse farm is really a trigger for all of these things. Suicide is what we call a multi-determined act. There's a lot that goes into it. Maybe if you've known someone who's committed suicide, the question is always why, and that's a legitimate question. And people tend to want to look for something that happened like right around the time that someone committed suicide. But suicide is something that's inside people for years and decades, and why it happens at a particular moment, you may find something, but it's rarely something that's just there, right? If, someone's brother dies, and then they commit suicide after their brother dies. Very sad, of course, but a lot of people's brothers die and they don't commit suicide. What was it about this particular person? What was in his or her past that sort of came rushing through at that trigger moment? So that's important. So that's very good, Angela. Amelia kind of wrapped it up also. Mabel's actions were driven by depression. I'd say there's an absence of feeling in her. All of these feelings are reinforced by the actions of those around her. Her father remarrying, good eye, Amelia, that's very important. Nicole, Mabel's actions come from a built-up place. I was just saying the same thing. Very good, Nicole. This is years of stuff inside of Mabel, and unfortunately, it triggers. Of course, she doesn't die as a result of her suicide attempt, and that's good. But I don't really know what the future holds for Mabel. Yeah, I'm worried about her. And Amanda, you really dug in here about what how the brothers treated her. And really, how do the brothers, not treat her? So there's the way the brothers, especially the oldest one, Joe, I think, is really kind of just real jerkus. The younger one is not so bad, but the fact that they are not supportive of her is what really matters. It's what they're not saying. They're just pushing her. What are you gonna do now, Mabel? So very good, Amanda. So good job, those of you who did the discussion board. I think you got a good handle on the story. So let's just sort of roll back a little bit here before we dig in and set the scene. So this is set in England. D.H. Lawrence is an English writer. It's set in coal country, a lot of coal mining in England, although this family is not a coal mining family. But it's important to note that aspect, because the area they're in, coal mining is a brutal thing to do. Especially 100 years ago, going deep underground, and there's the threat of collapse. You're inhaling coal dust. I mean, man, that's probably on the bottom of my list of jobs to do. I'm claustrophobic, which doesn't help. I'd rather be on a roof all day, but we're not talking about roofs. So it's coal mining country, and our doctor friend, is it Ferguson? I just read this story. Why can't I remember this? Our doctor friend, he likes helping these people who are sick, who are working class people, who are rough, right? Who spend time inside of the earth. He likes them. He draws energy from them. It was a stimulant to him to be in the homes of the working people, moving, as it were, through the innermost body of their life. His nerves were excited and gratified. He could come so near. So it is important that this is a working class, blue collar, coal mining part of England. Although this family, the Purvins, are horse dealers. They're horse people. Of course, 1922, that's when cars are starting to come around. Trains have already been around, and they're really starting to take off, and the horse business is not a good business anymore. So we have this opening, this central question really of the story is the first line. Hey, that reminds me. Do you remember what I said on the first day? I bet you do. I bet Nicole does. Nicole, you always pay attention to this. It's all right there in the first paragraph. Remember I told you that? Well, Mabel, and what are you going to do with yourself? And the rest of the story tries to answer that question. Of course, it's unresolved at the end. Asked Joe with foolish flippancy. You know what flippancy is? Doesn't really care. Not taking something serious that should be taken seriously. He felt quite safe himself. He did not care about anything since he felt safe himself. So we don't like Joe. We don't like Joe at all. There's a strange air of ineffectuality about the three men. None of them are really any more masters of the situation. All four of these kids, remember there's a fifth girl, a woman, who is married, Lucy, and that's where Mabel probably should go. There is a strange air of ineffectuality about the three men, and that means to be ineffectual is sort of ineffective. They were unable to carry on a successful horse dealership, more to do with the times maybe. They were all failed where their father was successful. One of them is getting married, and he would marry and go into harness. His life was over. He would be a subject animal now. Ooh. I gotta say, D.H. Lawrence is not a subtle writer in a lot of ways. He just, boom, tells it like it is. He would marry and go into harness. His life was over. He's gonna be a work on a horse farm because his wife's father works on a horse farm. They're all described very much in animal terms. He was an animal which controls, not which is controlled, but he was not the master of the situations of life. So they're all sort of this ineffectual conclave. They're all sort of powerless, and they're all powerless to help Mabel. Not that they're that interested in helping her. So it's a very sad scene at the beginning. This horse farm, which was very, very successful, is breaking up. The brothers are just mostly just self-absorbed. They found their own situations that they're not really happy with, because they're not going to be the boss like their dad was. The youngest brother, Fred Henry, tries to engage a little bit, but he's the youngest, so it's hard to get a lot of traction sometimes in conversations when you're the youngest. Have you had a letter from Lucy? Last week came the neutral reply. I do think Mabel is seriously depressed here. She's neutral, right? She doesn't have really any feelings at all. And I think we've talked about this before. My understanding of depression is not a feeling of sadness. It's really an absence of feeling. An absence of feeling. And that's really what we see here with Mabel. Mabel sat on like one condemned. Oof. Not good. So that is our scene before the doctor shows up, and we get a little history on Mabel after that. But we will we'll pick up there in part 2 of our conversation about D.H. Lawrence's The Horse Dealer's Daughter. And you get the title there, folks? Did you get the title? The title is defining her. It's not the stupid brother's sister. It's not the woman who committed suicide. It's the horse dealer's daughter. In the title, D.H. Lawrence is telling us what defines her. The adjective that defines her, the horse dealer's daughter. How would you define yourself, right? I am a college professor, Berninger. What words would you put before yourself? What is the most important thing that makes you up? In this case, the fact that she is the horse dealer's daughter is the driving force in her life. But we'll pick up with more of that in part 2.